Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the deck of his ship, watching the strange lights in the sky above Seoul. 3 days ago, those lights had been nothing more than bright dots. Now they were massive alien vessels hanging in Earth's atmosphere like metal clouds. The world had changed in just 72 hours. First contact with alien life. The discovery that humanity was not alone in the universe. And now, an invitation that felt more like a threat. Captain, the alien delegation is ready. To meet with our representatives, said Commander Kang Bo-ra as she approached. Her voice was steady, but Dae-ho could see the worry in her eyes. They had all heard the reports from other countries. Similar meetings were happening everywhere. Any word from the other naval bases? Dae-ho asked, adjusting his uniform. Even though this was no longer a normal military operation, old habits remained strong. The Americans, British, and Russians are all saying the same thing. The aliens want us to join their war. Bo-ra handed him a tablet with translated messages. They call it the Galactic Council. Dae-ho read through the reports. 7 different alien species working together to fight something called the Void Swarm. They needed more soldiers, more ships, more bodies to throw at an enemy that had been winning for decades. And if we say no? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They haven't said directly, but their ships are positioned over every major city on Earth. The message seems clear enough. The meeting was held in the Blue House with representatives from every major nation on Earth. Dae-ho was there as part of the South Korean military delegation. Dr. Park Soo-jin, the country's top xenobiologist, sat beside him. She had been studying the alien broadcast for days, trying to understand their language and intentions. The alien delegation entered the room like they owned it. 3 different species, each more strange than the last. The leader was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. He introduced himself as Chancellor Vextar of the Galactic Council. People of Earth, Vextar began, his voice coming through a translation device. We come to offer you a great opportunity. Your species shows promise, and we need allies in our fight against the Void Swarm. Dr. Park Soo-jin leaned forward. What exactly is the Void Swarm? Another alien, this one with insect-like features, answered. They consume everything, planets, stars, entire systems. They have destroyed hundreds of worlds. If they are not stopped, they will eventually reach Earth. And you want us to help you fight them, said the American representative. What can Earth offer that your advanced civilizations cannot? Vextar's expression was hard to read, but Dae-ho thought he saw something like amusement. Fresh perspectives, new tactics. Your species appears to have some interesting qualities. The Chinese delegate asked the obvious question. What do we get in return? Technology, weapons, knowledge of the galaxy beyond your small world. Vextar gestured, and holographic displays showed advanced ships and weapons. Join us, and humanity will advance 1,000 years in a single generation. It sounded too good to be true. Dae-ho had spent enough time in the military to know that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually was. What if we refuse? Dr. Park asked quietly. The room went silent. Vextar looked at her with what might have been surprise. Refuse? Why would you refuse protection from the Void Swarm? Protection? The Russian representative's voice was sharp. Or control? The Galactic Council protects all member species, said the insect-like alien. Sometimes protection requires guidance. Younger species often make dangerous mistakes without proper oversight. There it was. The threat hiding behind the offer. Join us willingly, or we'll make you join us anyway. The meeting continued for hours, but the outcome was already decided. Earth's leaders knew they had no real choice. The alien ships overhead made that clear. Humanity would join the Galactic Council's war against the Void Swarm. 2 weeks later, Dae-ho found himself in command of a ship he barely understood. The aliens had retrofitted several human naval vessels with their technology. Missile launchers were replaced with energy weapons. Radar systems were upgraded with sensors that could detect threats across star systems. The ship still looked like a human destroyer on the outside, but inside, it was a mix of Earth and alien technology. Engineer Choi Min-ho spent his days trying to understand how any of it worked. The power systems make no sense, Minho complained as he crawled out of an access panel. They use some kind of crystal matrix that responds to electromagnetic fields, but the math doesn't add up according to our physics. Does it work? Deho asked. Yes, but I have no idea why. It's like trying to drive a car when you don't know what an engine is. Dr. Park Soo-jin had been assigned to the ship as their alien technology specialist. She spent most of her time in the computer systems, trying to understand the aliens' databases and communication networks. I've been monitoring their communications, she said during one of their planning meetings. They don't think much of us. They keep referring to humans as the new auxiliaries and discussing how many losses they expect us to take. Commander Bo-Ra studied the tactical displays. Auxiliaries, that's what they call expendable support troops. They think we're cannon, fodder, Deho said. It wasn't really a surprise. The aliens had made it clear that humans were the newest and least advanced members of the Council. Of course they would be given the most dangerous assignments. Maybe we are, said Lieutenant Kim Tae-won. The young pilot had been assigned to lead their fighter squadron. Our ships are smaller and weaker than theirs. Our weapons are less advanced. What else would we be good for except charging into enemy fire? The human fleet consisted of 20 ships from various Earth nations. American destroyers worked alongside Chinese frigates and Russian submarines that had been converted for space combat. It was a strange mix, but it was all humanity could contribute to the Galactic War effort. Their first briefing with the alien command structure was humbling. Admiral Thexkor of the Zelani Empire looked at the human fleet like a farmer might look at livestock. Useful, perhaps, but certainly not equals. Your forces will serve as advanced scouts and shock troops, Thexkor explained. The Council's main fleet will provide support once you have engaged the enemy. Support? Deho asked. What kind of support? We will be ready to assist if the situation develops favorably. The alien's tone made it clear that he didn't expect the situation to develop favorably. He expected the humans to die while the main fleet stayed safely out of range. And if we take heavy losses? Commander Bo-Ra asked. Then you will have served the Council with honor. Thexkor's dismissive attitude made Deho's jaw clench. The Void Swarm must be stopped regardless of the cost. After the briefing, the human commanders met privately on Deho's ship. The other captains were from different countries and different military traditions, but they all understood the situation clearly enough. They're sending us to die, said Captain Sarah Chen of the USS Washington. They want to see how the swarm fights before they risk their own ships. Maybe, said Captain Boris Petrov of the Russian vessel Stalingrad. Or maybe they really think we can make a difference. Dr. Park looked up from her datapad. I've been analyzing their communications and tactical databases. The Council species all fight in very similar ways. They use massive ships with heavy weapons trying to overpower the enemy through superior firepower. And it's not working, Deho concluded. If it was, they wouldn't need us. Exactly. They've been fighting the same way for decades, and they're losing. Maybe they hope that humans will try something different. Or maybe they just need fresh bodies to slow down the swarm while they retreat, Captain Chen said grimly. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication. System. New orders were coming in from the alien command. The human fleet was being deployed to the Kepler 442 system, where a major battle was about to begin. Contact with the Void Swarm expected within 48 hours, the message stated. Human forces will engage first to assess enemy capabilities and tactics. Council fleet will support as situation permits. Deho looked at his fellow officers. They were about to enter humanity's first interstellar war, fighting for aliens who saw them as disposable tools. Their technology was unfamiliar. Their enemy was unknown, and their chances of survival seemed slim. Well, said Lieutenant Kim Tae-won with a grin that didn't quite hide his nervousness. At least we'll make history. First humans to die in space combat. Who says we're going to die? Commander Bo-Ra asked. The aliens think they know everything about warfare, but maybe they don't know everything about humans. As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Deho stood on his bridge and watched Earth shrink away behind them. The blue-green world looked small and fragile compared to the vast alien ships around them. But it was home, and despite everything, they were fighting to protect it. The aliens had dragged humanity into their war, expecting them to serve as cannon fodder in a conflict they didn't understand. They saw humans as primitives who would follow orders and die quietly when told to do so. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The hyperspace jump felt like falling through stars. When it ended, the human fleet found themselves in an unfamiliar solar system surrounded by the massive warships of the Galactic Council. And some way, the Kepler 442 system was nothing like Earth's solar system. Two gas giants orbited a red dwarf star, and between them hung the twisted remains of what had once been a thriving space station. The Void Swarm had been here. Captain Lee Dae-ho watched the tactical display as his ship, the Aegis, moved through the debris field. Broken metal and organic matter drifted past the viewports. Whatever the aliens had built here was gone now, consumed by an enemy that turned everything into more of itself. "Contact bearing 270, announced Lieutenant Park Kyung-soo from the sensor station. Multiple large signatures approaching from the outer system. "How many?" Commander Bo-ra asked. 15. No, 20. The numbers keep changing. It's like they're growing as they move. Dr. Park Soo-jin looked up from her analysis station. That's consistent with what I've learned about the swarm. They don't build ships the way we do. They grow them. Each vessel is a living creature bred for war. The alien command frequency crackled to life. Admiral Thexkor's voice was calm, almost bored. "Human fleet, advance to Grid Section 7 and engage the enemy. Council forces will monitor and provide assistance as needed." Dae-ho looked at the tactical display. Grid Section 7 was directly in the path of the approaching swarm ships. The Council fleet was positioned safely behind them, ready to observe, but not to fight. "Understood, Admiral," Dae-ho replied. "All human ships, form up for attack formation. Let's go see what we're dealing with." The 20 ships of Earth's first interstellar fleet moved forward in a loose formation. American destroyers took point, with Chinese frigates covering the flanks. The converted Russian submarines stayed in the rear, their nuclear missiles replaced with alien torpedo systems that none of them fully understood. Lieutenant Kim Tae-won launched his fighter squadron from the Aegis. The small craft were barely modified from their Earth designs with alien weapons bolted onto human airframes. They looked fragile compared to the massive warships around them. "This is Dragon Leader," Tae-won's voice came over the comm. "I have visual on the enemy, and they're ugly." The Void Swarm bioships looked like something from a nightmare. They were organic, with smooth black surfaces that seemed to absorb light. Some were shaped like giant insects, others like sea creatures from Earth's deepest trenches. They moved through space with an alien grace, turning and flowing like schools of predatory fish. "All ships weapons free," Dae-ho ordered. "Fire at will." The human fleet opened fire first. Energy beams and missile salvos reached out across the void, striking the bioships with flashes of brilliant light. Several of the alien vessels shuddered under the impact, their organic hulls cracking and bleeding strange fluids into space. But they didn't stop. If anything, the damage seemed to make them angry. The swarm ships accelerated toward the human fleet, closing the distance with frightening speed. They fired back with weapons that looked more like living creatures than machines. Streams of acid and clouds of hostile organisms shot across space, eating through hull armor and jamming sensor systems. Captain Sarah Chen's destroyer, the USS Washington, took a direct hit from what looked like a giant organic cannon. The alien acid burned through her ship's armor in seconds, and her voice came over the comm in a mixture of alarm and determination. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. The stuff is still eating through the bulkheads." Engineer Choi Min-ho was monitoring the battle from the Aegis. "Captain, their weapons aren't just energy or projectiles. They're using biological agents that keep working after impact. Our standard damage control procedures won't work." "Then we adapt," Dae-ho said grimly. "All ships seal off damaged sections completely. Don't try to repair them during combat. Just isolate the damage and keep fighting." It was a harsh lesson learned quickly. The swarm didn't fight like any enemy humanity had ever faced. Their ships were alive, their weapons were alive, and they adapted to human tactics in real time. Lieutenant, Taiwan's fighters were learning the same lesson. Dragon 2 is down. The enemy fighters are matching our moves before we make them. How is that possible? Commander Bora asked. Dr. Park was analyzing the sensor data as fast as it came in. Hive mind. They share information instantly. Every tactic we use is immediately known by every swarm unit in the battle. It should have been hopeless. 20 human ships against an enemy that could adapt to any strategy in seconds. But something strange began to happen. Sergeant Yang Jiwan was leading a damage control team on the USS Washington when the swarm boarding organisms breached the hull. The things looked like oversized spiders made of metal and flesh, and they moved with perfect coordination. But perfect coordination meant they all moved the same way. They're following a pattern, Yang realized as she watched them advance down the corridor. Left wall, center, right wall, center. They're not thinking. Individually, she set up her defense based on that pattern, placing mines and barriers to disrupt the rhythm. When the boarding organisms hit the traps, they didn't adapt quickly enough. Yang's team managed to drive them back, becoming the first humans to successfully repel a swarm boarding action. Similar discoveries were happening across the human fleet. The enemy's greatest strength was also a weakness. They shared information perfectly, but that meant they also shared limitations. Lieutenant Taiwan figured it out during a dogfight with swarm interceptors. They're too coordinated. They're trying to predict what I'm going to do, but I don't even know what I'm going to do. He started flying erratically, making random turns and sudden direction changes. The swarm fighters, trying to anticipate his moves, kept guessing wrong. Within minutes, he had shot down 3 enemy interceptors using pure unpredictability. All fighters, switch to chaos pattern flying, he broadcast. Don't plan your moves. Just react to whatever feels right. It went against every principle of military tactics, but it worked. The human fighters began scoring kills against an enemy that had been undefeated for decades. Captain Boris Petrov of the Stalingrad made his own discovery when a swarm bioship latched onto his vessel with organic grappling hooks. Instead of trying to break free, he did something unexpected. He rammed his ship directly into the nearest enemy vessel. The collision should have destroyed both ships, but Petrov had calculated the angles carefully. The Stalingrad's reinforced hull punched through the bioship's organic armor, and the explosion that followed took out 3 more enemy vessels. Crazy Russian, Captain Chen muttered over the comm, but there was admiration in her voice. That actually worked? Sometimes crazy is what you need, Petrov replied as he guided his damaged ship away from the wreckage. Engineer Minho was making discoveries of his own. The alien weapon systems on the human ships were designed to be used in specific ways, but human creativity found new applications. Captain, I figured out how to overcharge the energy weapons, he reported. It'll burn out the power crystals, but we can get 3 times normal output for about 30 seconds. Do it, Deho ordered without hesitation. All ships, prepare for maximum power burst on my mark. When the human fleet fired their overcharged weapons, the results surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. The energy beams were so powerful that they punched clean through multiple swarm bioships, destroying 5 enemy vessels with a single coordinated volley. The alien observers in the Council fleet were stunned. Admiral Thexcor's communications betrayed his shock. How did they achieve that power output? Those weapons shouldn't be capable of such energy levels. But the biggest surprise came from Sergeant Yang and her boarding party on the Washington. When another wave of swarm organisms breached the hull, she made a desperate decision. We're going to board them back, she announced to her team. It was insane. Humans in basic spacesuits attacking a living alien warship with nothing but courage and improvised weapons. But Yang had noticed something during the previous boarding action. The swarm organisms were perfectly adapted to defend their ships from outside attack, but they weren't prepared for enemies to come from inside. Her team managed to fight their way into the bioship's vital organs. Using improvised explosives made from the ship's own power systems, they destroyed the vessel from within. It was the first time in the war that anyone had successfully captured and destroyed a swarm bioship through boarding action. The tide of the battle began to turn. The swarm had adapted to conventional tactics, but human unpredictability kept them constantly off balance. Random fighter maneuvers, desperate ramming attacks, overcharged weapons, and boarding actions that made no tactical sense were somehow working. "Council Fleet, this is Captain Lee Daeho," he broadcast on the command frequency. "We could use that support you promised." There was a long pause before Admiral Thexcor replied. "Continue your current tactics. The Council Fleet will maintain position." Bora looked at her captain with raised eyebrows. "They're afraid to get close. They don't know how to fight an enemy that adapts this fast." "But we do," Daeho realized. "We adapt faster." When the battle finally ended, 12 of the 20 human ships were still combat capable. 8 had been destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting, but they had taken 18 swarm bioships with them. For a species that had been fighting a losing war for decades, it was an impossible result. The Council Fleet moved forward to secure the Sisir. 3 months after the battle at Kepler 442, the human fleet had grown. What started as 20 ships from Earth had become 60 vessels, with more arriving every week. The alien depot that served as their base was crowded with ships that looked nothing like they had when they left Earth. Captain Lee Daeho walked through the corridors of his ship, the Aegis, and barely recognized it. Engineer Choi Min-ho and his teams had been busy. Human ingenuity combined with alien technology had created something entirely new. "We've increased engine efficiency by 40%, Min-ho explained as they passed the modified power core. "The aliens designed these crystals to provide steady, reliable power. But if you vary the electromagnetic field in a specific pattern, you get more power," Daeho finished. "And the aliens never thought to try that? Their thinking is too linear. They see a system that works and assume it's optimized. But human engineers always ask, what if we do it differently?" The changes weren't just technical. The entire human approach to warfare was evolving in ways that confused and impressed their alien allies. Admiral Yoon Hye-jin had been promoted to command the expanding human fleet, bringing with her experience from the Korean Navy and a tactical mind that thought in ways the aliens couldn't predict. "The Council species fight like they're playing chess," she explained to her senior staff during a strategy meeting. "Everything is planned, ordered, predictable. They move their pieces according to established patterns." Commander Bora studied the holographic display showing recent battles, and the swarm adapts to those patterns. "Exactly. But humans don't play chess in space. We play..." Yoon paused, searching for the right comparison. "We play jazz, improvisation, based on a theme." Dr. Nam Ki-young, the fleet's chief science officer, had spent months studying captured swarm biomatter. His discoveries were changing everything the galaxy thought it knew about the enemy. "The hive mind is both their strength and their weakness," he explained to the assembled officers. "They share information instantly, which makes them incredibly coordinated, but that also means they think in the same patterns. Patterns we can disrupt," added Major Shin Dong-wook. The Special Forces commander had been developing new tactics for boarding actions and ground combat. His teams had successfully captured 3 more swarm bioships, providing invaluable intelligence. "The key is unpredictability," Shin continued. "Every time we do something they don't expect, it takes them time to adapt. If we can keep them constantly reacting instead of acting, we control the pace of the battle," Yoon concluded. "It's working. Our success rate has improved dramatically." The statistics were impressive. Human forces now had an 80% survival rate in major engagements, compared to the 40% rate of other Council species. More importantly, they were winning battles that had been considered impossible. The liberation of the Tau Ceti system was the turning point. The swarm had held the system for 5 years, using it as a breeding ground for new bioships. 3 previous Council attempts to retake it had failed with massive casualties. Admiral Yoon approached the problem differently. Instead of a direct assault on the heavily defended system, she scattered human forces across 12 different entry points and attacked simultaneously from all directions. "The swarm expects us to come from the most logical approach vector," she explained to her captains. "So we'll come from everywhere except the logical approach," Lieutenant Kim Tae-wan, now commanding an entire fighter wing, led the most daring part of the assault. His ships approached Tau Ceti through its asteroid belt, using the rocks for cover and emerging at seemingly random locations. Dragonwing, to all units, his voice crackled over the comm. Remember, no pattern flying. Trust your instincts and ignore your training. It sounded like madness, but it worked. The swarm defenders, trying to predict human movements, found themselves constantly out of position. By the time they adapted to one attack vector, the humans had already shifted to another. Captain Ryu Ji-ho, now leading the intelligence division, had provided crucial information about swarm weak points. His teams had learned to interpret the biological signals that the bioships used for communication. They're not just ships, he had explained. They're living creatures with organs, nervous systems, and vulnerabilities. Hit them in the right places, and they die just like any other animal. The knowledge proved decisive. Human forces targeted the bioships' sensory organs, blinding them to coordinated attacks. They struck at the neural clusters that controlled navigation, sending entire squadrons spinning helplessly through space. Colonel Oh Min-kyung led the ground assault on the swarm breeding facilities. Her forces used tactics that would have been impossible for other species. Instead of trying to destroy the facilities with overwhelming firepower, they infiltrated them like viruses, spreading chaos from within. We're not trying to outfight them, she explained to her troops. We're trying to outthink them. Every action should be unexpected. Every move should be something they've never seen before. The breeding facilities fell in hours instead of the months that previous assaults had required. For the first time in the war, the swarm was forced to completely abandon a system they had claimed. But the victory at Tau Ceti came with an unexpected consequence. The council species began to view humanity's growing effectiveness with suspicion rather than gratitude. Dr. Park Soo-jin, still serving as the fleet's xenobiologist and diplomatic specialist, intercepted communications between council ships that revealed growing concern about human capabilities. They're calling us dangerously unpredictable, and she reported to Admiral Yoon. Chancellor Vextar has requested a review of our combat methods to ensure they comply with council warfare regulations. Warfare regulations? Commander Bo-ra asked with disbelief. We're winning battles they couldn't win, and they want to regulate. How we do it? It's not about winning, Dr. Nam realized. It's about control. They expected us to be useful tools. Instead, we're becoming independent actors. The tension came to a head during the battle for the Proxima Centauri system. The swarm had launched a major offensive, threatening to break through council lines and reach the core systems. Human forces were deployed to hold a critical choke point while the main council fleet organized a counterattack. But when the counterattack came, it was half-hearted and poorly coordinated. Admiral Thek's corps seemed more concerned with preserving his own ships than with supporting the human forces that were bearing the brunt of the swarm assault. Council fleet, we need immediate support at Grid 77 Alpha, Admiral Yoon transmitted during the height of the battle. Human forces are outnumbered 3-1. Negative, Admiral Yoon, came the reply. Council forces must maintain defensive positions, continue current operations. It was clear that the Council was deliberately allowing human forces to take heavy casualties. Whether it was to weaken humanity or to test their limits, the intent was obvious. All human ships, this is Admiral Yoon, she broadcast on their private frequency. We're on our own. Execute Independence Protocol. Independence Protocol was something the humans had developed in secret. Instead of fighting a defensive action according to Council doctrine, they would use pure human tactics to turn the battle around. The change was immediate and dramatic. Human ships broke formation and scattered across the battlefield in what appeared to be complete chaos. The swarm, programmed to exploit weakened formations, moved to attack what they perceived as vulnerable targets. They flew directly into a trap. The scattered human ships weren't fleeing. They were positioning themselves for a coordinated strike, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Using timing that relied on human intuition rather than computer calculations, 60 human vessels attacked from 60 different angles simultaneously. The swarm's hive mind couldn't process that many independent variables at once. For the first time in recorded history, a swarm fleet was completely destroyed without losing a single defending ship. The council observers were stunned into silence. Admiral Thexcor's voice, when it finally came over the comm, was barely controlled. "Admiral, Yoon, explain your tactical reasoning for that maneuver." "No," Yoon replied simply. "Our tactical methods are now classified as human military secrets." The implication was clear. Humanity was no longer sharing all of its innovations with the Council. They had moved from junior partners to independent allies, whether the aliens liked it or not. Dr. Lee Young-soo, the fleet's chief weapons researcher, had been developing technology that combined human theoretical physics with alien engineering. His latest creation was a weapon that used chaos theory to make its effects impossible to predict or adapt to. "We call it a probability disruptor," he explained to the senior staff. "It fires energy bursts that follow quantum uncertainty principles. Even we don't know exactly what it will do when it hits a target." "That sounds dangerous," Commander Bora observed. "It is. But the swarm can't adapt to something that's fundamentally unpredictable. Every shot is different, every effect is unique." The weapon proved devastatingly effective in subsequent battles. Swarm bioships that had adapted to all known energy weapons found themselves helpless against attacks that changed their fundamental properties mid-flight. But perhaps the most important development was in human understanding of the Admiral Yoon Hee-jin stood in the command center of the human flagship Indomitable, watching intelligence reports flow across her screens. 6 months of victories had transformed the human fleet from expendable auxiliaries into the Council's most effective fighting force. But with success came revelation, and what they had discovered about their allies was troubling. Captain Ryu Ji-ho entered the command center with a grim expression. His intelligence teams had been monitoring Council communications for weeks, and what they found painted a disturbing picture of alien intentions. "Admiral, we need to talk privately," he said, glancing at the other officers present. They moved to Yoon's private office, where Ryu activated a human-designed signal jammer. The device was one of many innovations that the humans no longer shared with their alien allies. "It's worse than we thought," Ryu began, placing a datapad on the Admiral's desk. "The Council isn't just using us as expendable troops. They're planning to eliminate us after the war." Yoon read through the intercepted communications, her expression growing darker with each line. The messages were coded, but human cryptographers had learned to break alien encryption systems with disturbing ease. "Project Containment," she read aloud. "Phase 1. Allow human forces to weaken both themselves and the swarm through aggressive tactics. Phase 2. Restrict human access to advanced technology and strategic intelligence. Phase 3. Relocate human population to designated worlds under Council supervision." "There's more," Ryu said grimly. "They've been deliberately withholding intelligence about swarm weaknesses. Battles we lost could have been won if we'd had complete information." The evidence was overwhelming. The Council had never intended for humanity to be an equal partner. They had brought Earth into the war to serve as a weapon against the swarm, and once that weapon was no longer needed, they planned to lock it away where it could never threaten them. "How long until they move to Phase 2? Yoon asked. "According to these projections, as soon as the current swarm offensive is defeated, they expect the war to end within the next 6 months. Yoon studied the tactical displays showing current fleet positions. Human forces were scattered across dozens of systems, often operating independently of Council oversight. It was a strong position, but not if their supposed allies decided to act against them. "Call a meeting of all human commanders," she ordered. "Full security protocols, and find out exactly what capabilities we have without Council support." The meeting took place aboard the Aegis, Captain Lee Dae-ho's ship that had become a symbol of human resilience. Representatives from every major human fleet element attended, either in person or through secure communications. "We have a problem," Admiral Yoon began without preamble, and laid out the evidence of the Council's betrayal. The response was immediate and predictable: anger, outrage, and demands for immediate action. But Captain Dae-ho raised a hand for quiet. "We knew this might happen," he said calmly. "We've been preparing for it whether we admitted it or not. The question is, what do we do now? Colonel Oh Min Kyung leaned forward. We could expose them, broadcast the evidence to all council species. Some of them might support us. Or they might decide we're too dangerous and unite against us, countered Major Shin Dong-wook. We can't assume any of the alien species will choose humans over their own kind. Dr. Nam Ki-young had been studying the strategic situation. There's another option. We finish the war ourselves. The room fell silent. The idea was audacious beyond belief. Humanity had been fighting the swarm for less than a year, while the council species had been losing to them for decades. How could humans succeed where their technologically superior allies had failed? Explain, Admiral Yoon said. The council has been fighting defensively, Nam continued. They're trying to contain the swarm, push them back, reclaim lost territory. But that's not how you defeat a hive mind species. Dr. Lee Young-soo nodded, understanding. You go for the source, cut off the head and the body dies. Exactly. The swarm isn't just a collection of individual bioships. It's one massive organism spread across multiple star systems. If we can find and destroy the core intelligence, the entire swarm dies at once, Admiral Yoon finished. But the council must know this. Why haven't they tried it? Captain Ryu answered that question. Because reaching the swarm core would require tactics they consider unacceptable. Sacrificing entire fleets, ignoring civilian populations, focusing purely on the strategic objective regardless of cost. Things humans are apparently willing to do, Commander Bora observed. The moral implications were staggering, but so was the alternative. If the Council succeeded in containing humanity after the war, Earth would become a prison planet, its people reduced to controlled populations under alien supervision. We need more information about the swarm core, Admiral Yoon decided. And we need to prepare for the possibility that we'll be fighting a two-front war. Engineer Choi Min-ho had been working on that problem for months. We've been modifying our ships for independent operation. We can maintain and repair our equipment without council support, and we've been stockpiling resources. What about weapons? Asked Lieutenant Kim Tae-won, now commanding an entire fighter division. Dr. Lee Young-soo smiled grimly. We've been developing some surprises, weapons based on human physics theories that the aliens haven't considered. If we need to defend ourselves, over. The following weeks, human preparations accelerated. On the surface, they continued to serve as the Council's most effective anti-swarm force. But underneath, they were building the capability to operate completely independently. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Yang Ji-won, now leading elite boarding teams, captured a swarm bioship that contained navigational data about the enemy's core systems. It's not what we expected, she reported to the command staff. The swarm isn't centered on a single planet or station. It's distributed across 17 different star systems, all connected through some kind of biological network. Dr. Nam studied the captured data with growing excitement. This is incredible. The swarm core isn't a place, it's a process. The hive mind exists in the connections between systems, not in any single location. Which means, Admiral Yoon prompted, we don't have to destroy 17 heavily defended systems. We just have to cut the connections between them, disrupt the network, and each system becomes isolated. Without the hive mind coordinating them, they'll be easy targets. It was elegant, in its simplicity, and typically human in its approach. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy's strength, they would attack its ability to coordinate that strength. But implementing the plan would require resources and positioning that only a major offensive could provide, and that meant convincing the Council to authorize an attack that would put human forces at the center of the final battle. We tell them part of the truth, Admiral Yoon decided. We've discovered the location of key swarm systems. We recommend a major offensive to end the war quickly. The presentation to the Council Military Command was a masterpiece of selective information. Human intelligence teams had identified critical swarm systems. A coordinated offensive could break the enemy's ability to resist. The war could be ended within months instead of years. Chancellor Vextar was skeptical. Your proposal would require significant Council fleet elements to support human operations. The risk to our forces would be considerable. The risk of not acting is greater, Admiral Yoon replied. Our analysis shows that the swarm is preparing its own major offensive. If we don't strike first, we'll be fighting a much larger enemy force. That part was true. The swarm had been building up forces in their core systems, preparing for what appeared to be a final push against Council territory. The humans were simply proposing to strike before the enemy was ready. Admiral Thexkor studied the tactical projections. What support do you require from Council forces? Minimal direct combat involvement, Yoon said carefully. We need transport and logistics support plus reserve forces in case our initial assault fails. Human forces will handle the primary attack. It was exactly what the Council wanted to hear. Humans would take the risks and casualties, while Council forces stayed safely in support roles. From their perspective, it was perfect. Either the humans would succeed and end the war, or they would be destroyed solving the Council's containment problem. Approved, Vextar said. Operation Final Strike will commence in 2 weeks, but as the Council prepared to support what they thought was a desperate human gambit, Admiral Yoon was implementing a very different plan. Operation Final Strike would indeed end the war, but not in the way their alien allies expected. Captain Daeho coordinated the secret communications that passed between human commanders. Every ship captain, every squad leader, every pilot knew their real mission. They would break the swarm's network and destroy the hive mind, but they would do it without regard for Council oversight or approval. Once we begin the final assault, Admiral Yoon announced in her last briefing to human forces, we'll be committed. The Council will try to maintain control, to limit our actions to what they consider acceptable. We're going to ignore them completely. Dr. Lee Young-soo had prepared special weapons for the mission. Quantum disruption devices, he explained. They'll interfere with the biological. The final battle began in a way that nobody expected. As the combined Council and human fleets dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the first swarm core system, Admiral Yoon Hee-jin made an announcement that changed everything. All human forces, this is Fleet Admiral Park Hyun-soo, came the transmission from the massive flagship Indomitable. Operation Final Strike is now active. All units are to ignore previous tactical restrictions and engage targets of opportunity. Command authorization. Independence declared. The word sent shockwaves through both fleets. Fleet Admiral Park had been promoted in secret, with authority over all human forces in the galaxy. His first order was to release humanity from Council, oversight entirely. Chancellor Vextar's response was immediate and furious. Admiral Park, you are exceeding your authority. Human forces will comply with established Council tactical doctrine or face consequences. Negative, Chancellor. Park replied calmly. Human forces are operating under Earth authorization. We appreciate the Council's support, but will handle this war our way. The human fleet broke formation and scattered across the star system in what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships moved in seemingly random directions, ignoring Council attempts to maintain coordinated assault patterns. But Captain Lee Daeho, watching from the bridge of the Aegis, knew better. All ships, execute Chaos Pattern 7, he transmitted, on the human command frequency. Remember, no predictable movements, trust your instincts. What looked like disorder was actually the most sophisticated battle plan humanity had ever attempted. Instead of following rigid formations, each human ship captain was given general objectives and trusted to achieve them using their own judgment. It was a level of tactical flexibility that no other species had ever attempted. The swarm responded as expected, trying to predict and counter human movements. But there was nothing to predict. Every human ship was operating independently, making decisions based on immediate battlefield conditions rather than predetermined plans. Lieutenant Kim Tae-wan led his fighter squadrons in attacks that defied every principle of space combat. His pilots flew in patterns that seemed suicidal, diving through enemy formations and emerging from unexpected angles. The swarm interceptors, programmed to counter coordinated attacks, found themselves helpless against pure randomness. Dragon, "Wing, this is insane," one of his pilots transmitted. "We're flying right through their defensive lines." "Exactly," Taewon replied. "They're expecting us to avoid their strong points, so we hit them directly and keep moving before they can adapt." Meanwhile, Major Shin Dong-wook was leading boarding actions against swarm bioships using tactics that would have horrified military theorists. His teams didn't try to disable or capture the enemy vessels. Instead, they planted quantum disruption, devices designed by Dr. Lee Young-soo in the bioship's neural centers. "Plant the device and get out," he ordered his teams. "Don't try to hold territory. We're not here to win these ships. We're here to break their network." Each disruption device created a localized field that interfered with the biological connections between swarm units. As more devices activated, the hive mind began to fragment. Individual bioships started operating without central coordination, making them easy targets for human forces. But the real surprise came when the Council fleet tried to reassert control over the battle. "Human vessels return to formation immediately," Admiral Thexkor commanded. "You are jeopardizing the entire operation with these reckless tactics." "Admiral Thexkor," came the reply from General Kim So-young, commanding human ground forces. "With respect, our tactics are working. Your tactics have been failing for decades." To prove her point, Kim's forces launched an assault on the primary swarm breeding facility in the system. Instead of the massive coordinated attack that Council doctrine required, she used small teams that struck simultaneously at dozens of different points. The facility, designed to resist large-scale assaults, had no defense against the swarm of human raiders that seemed to appear everywhere at once. Within hours, the breeding center was destroyed, along with millions of developing swarm organisms. "Impossible," Thexkor muttered. "That facility was supposed to be impregnable." "Only against predictable attacks," Professor Jang Wubin replied. The strategic mastermind had been coordinating human operations from the Fleet Command Center. "We're not predictable." But the Council's real shock came when they realized that humanity was fighting a completely different war than the one they had authorized. Chancellor Vexitar monitored the battle from his command ship, watching human forces achieve impossible victories across multiple star systems simultaneously. It should have been cause for celebration, but instead it filled him with dread. "They're not following the operational plan," he said to his staff. "They're implementing their own strategy." "Should we intervene?" asked one of his advisors. "With what?" Vexitar replied grimly. "They have more effective combat forces than we do now, and they're not listening to our orders anyway." The truth was becoming clear to the Council leadership. They had created a monster. The primitive humans they had intended to use as expendable troops had become the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they were no longer under alien control. Dr. Nam Ki-young's analysis of swarm biology was proving crucial as human forces pressed their advantage. "The network connections are breaking down," he reported to Fleet Admiral Park. "Each system we disrupt makes the others weaker." "How many more systems do we need to hit?" Park asked. 3 more major nodes and the entire hive mind should collapse, but they're the most heavily defended positions in swarm space. Then we hit them simultaneously. No time for the enemy to adapt or reinforce. The final assault was launched across 4 different star systems at once. Human forces, now operating with complete independence, struck at the heart of the swarm network with tactics that had never been seen before in galactic warfare. Captain Ryu Ji-ho led the intelligence operation that identified the exact locations of the network nodes. His teams had infiltrated swarm bioships and mapped the connections between systems using captured alien technology modified with human insights. "Each node is protected by approximately 50 bioships," he reported. "Standard Council tactics would require overwhelming force to break through." "Good thing we don't use standard tactics," Engineer Choi Min-ho replied. He had spent months preparing for this moment, modifying human ships for maximum speed and maneuverability. "My modifications will let us punch through their defenses before they know we're there." The attacks were coordinated by Colonel Oh Min-kyung, whose ground forces had learned to think in 3 dimensions during months of boarding actions. "We don't try to fight through their defenses," she explained to her commanders. "We go around them, under them, through them, every approach they don't expect." When the assault began, the swarm defenders found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Human ships appeared from impossible angles, struck with devastating effect, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Dr. Lee Young-Soo's quantum disruption weapons proved devastatingly effective. Each device created a cascade failure in the biological networks that connected swarm systems. As the network collapsed, millions of bioships across the galaxy suddenly lost their coordination. Network integrity dropping rapidly, Dr. Nam reported, as he monitored the battle from the Indomitable. 70%, 50%, 30%. The moment the network fell below critical thresholds, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Swarm bioships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly became confused and disoriented. They began attacking each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe without the hive mind to guide them. "All human forces, this is Fleet Admiral Park," came the broadcast. "The swarm network is down. Begin mop-up operations." What followed was less a battle than a cleanup operation. Isolated swarm bioships cut off from central control were easy targets for human forces that had learned to think independently. Within hours, star systems that had been under swarm control for decades were liberated, but the Council's response to humanity's victory was not gratitude. Admiral Park, Chancellor Vexitar's transmission was cold with suppressed anger. "You have exceeded all authorized parameters. Human forces will stand down immediately and submit to Council oversight." "Negative, Chancellor," Park replied. "Human forces will continue operations until all swarm presence is eliminated from this galaxy." "That was not your decision to make. It became our decision when you decided to use us as expendable tools," Park said, his voice carrying the weight of months of hidden knowledge. "We know about Project Containment, Chancellor. We know about your plans to control and relocate human populations after the war." The admission sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. How had the humans discovered classified operational plans? How long had they been preparing for this confrontation? "Human technological capabilities have exceeded acceptable parameters," Vextar said, abandoning any pretense of alliance. "For the security of the galaxy, human expansion must be contained." "You're welcome to try," General Kim So-young replied from the surface of a liberated planet. "But you should know that we've been preparing for this possibility." The Council fleet moved to surround HFY